Honorable Chairman and members of the Judiciary Committee, I'll be focusing my testimony tonight on just three of the bills being heard for the sake of brevity. Americans were horrified by the summer 2015 release of videos showing employees of Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion chain, negotiating prices, quantities, and types of fetal body parts they could harvest and supply from babies aborted at their facilities. Both chambers of Congress conducted hearings and recommended criminal investigations. The Justice Department opened an investigation this past December. The abortion method frequently described in the Planned Parenthood videos, the dilation and evacuation, or D&E abortion, is the abortion method frequently used for procuring intact tissues, organs, and body parts from aborted babies. It is a brutal type of abortion during which the living unborn child is literally torn apart limb from limb in her mother's womb, the various pieces being pulled out through the birth canal. I have submitted a diagram illustrating precisely what it is you're considering, and I urge you to support House Bill 7026, which would prohibit the practice of dismemberment abortion in Rhode Island. I also speak in support tonight of H 7735, which addresses a loophole in our parental consent law for abortions performed on minors. In states lacking a parental consent law, states like our neighbor Connecticut, an adult male can impregnate a young girl and take her to an abortion clinic without the knowledge of her parents. After this secret abortion, this cycle of abuse may continue. Further, if she suffers complications following the abortion, her parents will lack the information necessary to ensure that she receives critical follow-up care. According to a 2016 report compiled by the Connecticut Catholic Conference, using data obtained from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, 342 abortions were performed on minors from Rhode Island from 2004 through 2015. It is noteworthy that 4 of the 5 surgical abortion facilities in Connecticut, including the facility nearest Rhode Island, are owned and operated by the same corporate entity that owns and operates the Planned Parenthood abortion facility in Providence. It is not difficult to speculate that protections provided under Rhode Island's parental consent law might be easily and lawfully at present circumvented by scheduling the abortion at a nearby branch across the state line. H 7735 will address this loophole in our parental consent law. Lastly, I raise 4 brief points in opposition to H 7340, which, notwithstanding the cosmetic changes made since last year, remains the most extreme abortion bill we have seen in Rhode Island. H 7340 would prohibit the state from restricting, that is, from banning the use of, quote, medically recognized methods, end quote, of abortion. 2 such medically recognized methods of abortion are the previously described dismemberment abortions, as well as partial birth abortions. H 7340 would protect the use of these 2 inhumane and gruesome methods of late-term abortion in Rhode Island by prohibiting the state from restricting their use. Second, since 1975, Rhode Island's Quick Child statute has banned late-term abortions performed on, quote, an unborn child whose heart is beating, who is experiencing electronically measurable brain waves, who is discernibly moving, and who is so far developed and matured as to be capable of surviving the trauma of birth with the aid of usual medical care and facilities available in this state, end quote. H 7340 would repeal this objective 4 criteria definition, replacing it with a laughably subjective determination of fetal viability left solely to the discretion of the attending physician. That is, the abortionist who stands to gain financially, even abortionists like Kermit Gosnell, leaving the door open to abortions all the way up to the moment of birth. Third, H 7340 would prevent the Department of Health from applying regulations or standards on licensed abortion facilities other than those, quote, in accordance with evidence-based medically accepted standards for the provision of abortion, end quote. In other words, the state could only enforce those regulations and standards that the abortion industry sets for itself. Worse, the proposed language would create a presumption in state law that the enactment or enforcement of regulations and standards for abortionists are a, quote, pretext for interfering in access to abortion. Finally, H 7340 weakens statutes prohibiting public funding for abortions and creates a presumption against funding restrictions that may be said to, quote, restrict access, end quote, to abortion. I would be happy to address any questions as I am able.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Bartha? Representative Vella Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Bartha, I've received several emails from individuals with regards to a facility called the Ancora, and I was told that when women go into the Ancora for any type of an examination, that they're actually being shamed and, in essence, coerced into keeping the baby and seeing the pregnancy through to full birth. Could you comment on that, please?
My colleague who testified earlier, Ms. Safiatou Lamine, could have commented more because she's our services director, and Rhode Island Right to Life has Right to Life Services, our affiliate, and we do a lot of things there. We are very large and one of the oldest providers of pregnancy support, diapers, clothing, formula, strollers, bassinets, etc., through our Maternity Hope Chest. But we recently began the Ancora Women's Mobile Care Center, which is under Safi's partial direction. Our nurse manager runs it. It provides free pregnancy tests and ultrasounds and limited STI testing at various locations throughout Rhode Island. It's a mobile unit. I don't know how providing information could be in any way considered. What did they say it does?
They said that when women go into the facility, that they're shamed. That they're shamed about the idea that they may be considering terminating the pregnancy through an abortion.
I could categorically deny that. I'm not on the facility because I'm not the nurse manager, but I could certainly have her come testify at another time, but I would categorically deny that. Number two, I would suggest that the people complaining about that have raised those charges, have they been a client on the bus?
They didn't share that information with me, just that they were told that the women were shamed. Just two other brief questions, if you know. Sure. When the women do go through the Ancora for the examination, are they able to hear the fetal heartbeat?
I don't know the answer to that. You'd have to ask Safi. I believe that after a certain age, they can hear the fetal heartbeat. And I don't know what that cutoff is. Our nurse manager would be able to answer that question better.
So you don't know if the woman is far along enough so that there is a heartbeat present. You don't know whether or not during the examination the volume is up so they could hear the heartbeat.
I know that after a certain age, and again, you can see a heartbeat on the monitor. I don't know what that age. Our nurse manager would know that.
And do you know whether or not they show the pregnant woman the image of the fetus in womb?
Oh, absolutely.
They do show.
They absolutely do. That's one of the main reasons that a woman would want to have the ultrasound, is so that she can see. The ultrasound's a very visual, amazing piece of medical diagnostic equipment, and you can see with your own eyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bracey, can you direct me to where in 7340 it creates a presumption of taxpayer-funded abortions?
Absolutely. In item,
And actually, to be more accurate, a presumption of abortion funded with public funds, I believe.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm vandalizing your microphone, Mr. Chairman. Yes, by restricting access, by restricting, many would argue that any enactment of a prohibition for example, language that would prohibit Medicaid, state Medicaid program from funding abortions would be, by its very definition, restricting access, because the other side has argued, in fact, I think the prior witness or one of the prior witnesses has talked about the affordability being an obstacle to abortion. I am suggesting, strongly suggesting, the strong likelihood that very quickly after the passage of this law, legal challenges will be raised suggesting that any prohibition on state funding for abortion in any state program would be considered as the state restricting access to abortion.
Well, the bill doesn't restrict, it's not about access, it's about the decision to have one. I mean, the word access, I don't actually believe shows up in the bill at all.
Yeah, line 17, page 1, prohibits the state from restricting access to evidence-based, medically recognized methods of contraception or abortion, or the provision of such contraception or abortion except in accordance with evidence-based, medically recognized standards. Very clearly, if the state were to pass a funding restriction on abortion coverage, that could be considered by a plaintiff, a potential plaintiff, as the state restricting access to abortion, because as previous witnesses for the other side have testified, affordability is very often an obstacle for many abortion.
So I'll just point out what I think are two problems with that argument. One is the fact of the matter is the Rhode Island Constitution specifically says nothing in our law could be construed to grant a right of public funding for abortion. There's a specific constitutional provision for that. And that is a huge leap to go from the phrase restrict access to evidence-based, medically recognized methods of contraceptive to somehow saying that automatically funding restrictions are just going to go away. You know, we have to read these laws in harmony with each other, and that would be, you know, that would be like me reading a red light law as to include all colors of orange and yellow and perhaps purple mixed with red. I mean, it's a big leap. Would you agree?
I would agree that it would perhaps be as big a leap as finding a right to abortion in the so-called penumbra of the rights in the 14th Amendment.
Which they did in Roe versus Wade, which you're referring to, and
Yeah.
upheld in Casey, right? And then upheld in Casey, and upheld in
I
Roe's
would
progeny.
suggest very clearly the Supreme Court, no less, found a right to abortion in our Constitution, which nowhere ever specified one. So I've suggested the strong likelihood that a case would be filed very shortly challenging state restrictions on abortion funding as restricting access to abortion, which the bill clearly prohibits, and that the courts could go either way. So I'm making that suggestion on many court cases that have been filed, and I'll certainly leave your proof on your opinion as well.